Welcome to The Intentional Way, where literally every moment is a step towards purposeful living. I'm Bryan Hatch, here to explore the power of intention with you. Learn from our guests who embody intentionality. I'm glad you're here with me. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of The Intentional Way, and I'm excited today to have a very special guest with us. It is Chaplain Captain James Simpson. I'm stoked for so many reasons to have you here, and I might be able to go through a rap sheet of your background history, from careers to changing careers a few times to jumping into the military and the Army. You graduated recently from Air Assault School. The guy we have here with us is incredible and pushes limits and boundaries, and recently learned some other new things about him that I'm sure we'll get to. But James Simpson is someone that if you don't know, I'm excited for you to hear him today. What a pleasure it is to have you here as not just a guest here, but a friend, someone that I count as someone that I hope to see for the eternities. James, maybe everybody else calls you, but you've been a friend of mine for so long. So James is probably going to come up, and I apologize for anybody that's in the military that I should be calling him by his chaplain captain, but James is my buddy. What else would people need to know about you that maybe they couldn't find on a LinkedIn bio or something? Like, what else should we know about you?
I'm married. I have 6 daughters. That's usually kind of like an icebreaker to share with people. It gets a little reaction, especially when I'm talking to soldiers or whatnot, or at events. Yeah, 6 daughters from 16 down to 1 years old. So I think a big deal or a big accomplishment or big thing that my wife and I take on a daily basis. I think that's something special about us. Yeah.
That's incredible. So not only is he military man taking care of family, but he's taking care of a large family of 6 girls. Thank you for all you're doing for service to the country, service to your family, and otherwise. Tell me what's going good. What have you been up to? What is something that you want to share that's happening right now in life that is worthy of conversation here today?
Yeah, there's a lot of good things going on. I can talk for days about being a chaplain and ministering to soldiers. The experience in the military is a very unique one, which I didn't really comprehend until I joined. And I joined much later. Like I was 37 when I commissioned as a second lieutenant to go on the chaplain candidate program while I did school at BYU for the chaplaincy. So that's much later. Joined the Army. I didn't have any prior service. So it was really a new experience. And my background is I worked for University of Phoenix. I did sales. Went over to Infusionsoft, which is now called Keep, customer retention, worked in management positions, worked on getting my master's in counseling while I was there, left there to go to become a counselor, licensed therapist, had my practice for about 3 years. And I just kind of felt like there's something more for me to do. I enjoyed counseling. I enjoyed working with people. It's a great joy for me. But I also felt like there's something more for me to do. And that came in my kind of like pursuit with my creator, my Heavenly Father, trying to understand what that might look like for me. And it's a tough challenge too, because at that time we had our house in Arizona, we had 4 kids, we had 1 on the way, and I made a decision to become a chaplain. I had looked into it many years earlier, but didn't act on it at that point. And I felt a real call and a sense of duty to take that on. My dad had served in the Army. My grandfather was served in the Korean War. So that the patriotic root was very strong in my family. And so we took that route. I counseled with my wife, which I feel is a very important principle in life. A lot of times early in our marriage, I would do things without counseling, and usually it turned to bad outcomes. So I've learned in my life it's so important to counsel with my spouse. I treat her, she's my matriarch. If I'm a patriarch, she's a matriarch.
For
And
sure.
we try to lead the family together in our decisions. And she was very supportive of it. And she just wanted to do what she felt was what the Lord wanted us to do, and had her confirmation for that. So solar house 2020, COVID. I mean, like
Mm.
COVID hits like in February or whatnot, or March. And then we put our house on the market, and like 2 days later, that's when President Trump announced like we're doing a 2-week shutdown. So we had like nobody coming to check out our house. We had to plan it. I got accepted to BYU on a short turnaround time frame, which was pretty crazy. Like this doors were opening, and it got really panicky. Like, oh my gosh, are we gonna be able to sell a house? Because we need to sell a house to be able to get up to Utah. And I was gonna be going to school full time, so we were gonna have much income. taking another big risk again for something that we felt to do. And luckily, things calmed down after a few weeks. We were able to sell our house, get up to Utah, and all that stuff. And then being in a BYU program it's a 90 credit 2-year course. It was a grind with classes. And when you talk about doing a lot of religious classes, there's just a lot more intense study than when I did my counseling program, as far as writing papers and references and research. It was a lot more actually in religious study courses. But that was a grind for 2 years. Left for 3 months. My family, that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I emotionally just broke down the day before, a couple of days before I had to leave, just realized I'm going to be gone for 3 months. My wife was pregnant, was going to give birth while I was away for those 3 months. But we got through it with family support, and I completed the training for that. Got our first assignment to what was then Fort Polk, now Fort Johnson, Louisiana, which is one of the tougher locations to get. If you look on the least desirable locations in the Army, you got Fort Irwin, California, which I grew up in Barstow. That's another insight that maybe it's a desert town in California. But you got Fort Irwin, California, you got Fort Polk. They're probably like the least two desirable places to go in the Army. And we've been here for the last year and a half. And we had so we have six. That's when we had our sixth when I was at training for the first time. And just an intense change of lifestyle. I'm older, but I still have commanders and leaders that I report to and responsibilities, and that the military's property, so to say. And so if I want to go somewhere, it's like I can't be like, oh, I'm just going to go. Or when I was in my counseling practice, I couldn't just create my own schedule. No, the Army determines that for you. You're at morning formation at 0630. You're doing PT. You got closeout formations. You got meetings. There's missions to complete. There's ranges to go out to for shooting. There's exercises that we're doing, and you got to be there. Right? I can't just go and do things. If I want to go somewhere outside of 250 miles, I got to get permission to do that. I can't just, I'm a grown adult, do what I want. That's not how this works. So I think for most people in the civilian world probably don't really comprehend. And I think there's a piece where civilians are like, oh, thank you for your service. But there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that there's a lot of sacrifice and giving up of sometimes freedoms to serve our countries. So I'm really proud of the soldiers that I serve with and their dedication and commitment, and their family, like spouses and children that sacrifice to fight our nation's wars and protect our communities and our country.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a lot, but
No,
that's just some of the information.
there's no room here to be sorry. What a fascinating journey. And I think you look at what you've just shared in a matter of minutes, that spans most of your adult life. And you said it very succinctly, very quickly. But I don't think that it would be useful to act like any one of those things were like easy. And you alluded to from changing from being in like your sales jobs, then to being a counseling job. That's different. That's a big transition. And then from counseling into the military. Now, I recognize as a chaplain, you've told me a little bit, and I've learned a little bit more about the chaplain responsibilities. Not that I know it like you do. But there is some connection between counseling and being a chaplain. There's some connection there. But being in the military is a massive transition. So at least two massive ones. And then adding kids to the life, it sounds like there's no shortage of complexity that goes into what you've created in these years of your life,
Yeah, there's a lot of complexity in the environment that we're in, and you just never know. Like at a moment's notice, 48 hours, you have to be somewhere. And yeah, when you add family onto that, and they want to know what's going to happen, where it's going to go, and the Army's a big force, right? Just like a big corporation. The bigger it gets, sometimes there's more rules and red tape to get placed in, and then there's layers of communication that have to go down, and they have to come back up, and those things can take time. And while we wanted to move faster and do those things with large organizations, it's hard to be nimble. So there's a requirement for patience and wisdom just in the process to try to understand the bigger picture of things as you're in these kind of organizations.
Yeah. What a fascinating journey you've been on. There's one thing that keeps burning my mind. You mentioned that there were things that you did as the patriarch that weren't always, or I don't know exactly how to say it the way you said it, but it was like, it wasn't always the right decision. And I'm just going to push on you. Are you willing to share one of those things that you did that you were like, I didn't get counsel. I didn't drive counsel with my wife, and that caused some friction? Or I'm not trying to find your discussions with your wife, but more of what was the choice that you made that felt off for you?
Yeah, one that kind of comes to my mind is we'd been married for a few years. We were living at that point I'd moved to Arizona. I was working at University of Phoenix, and there was a gentleman I was working with, became friends with, and he had a business idea. And I was like, yeah, let's jump. I felt like a sense of, I like the business opportunities and entrepreneurial spirit. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. That sounds cool. And I got a credit card to help like invest and be part of this partnership as a business. And I more like inform my wife that's what I was going to do instead of
Mm,
counseled with my wife
mm,
that is this something I could do? And she had some hesitations. She tends to always be supportive and trust me, which I appreciate. She did have some concerns, and I just moved on. And oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Like just my own personal confidence of what will happen. That business venture didn't really turn out to anything, and it's kind of a loss of money, which for our young family at that time, not having much income was added a financial stressor to our
mm.
situation. And so I just think for myself, I learned that listening to my wife, asking for her counsel and her thoughts, she helps me see things that I can't see with a different set of eyes and ask questions about the topic because there's no, a lot of times for her, it's not, it's just trying to create a reality of what's going on for her. It's not about, there's necessarily a bias for her or something that she really wants out of it. So I just always feel like her counsel is pretty wise
Yeah.
that she gives to me.
I
And many
think,
times, just what are we going to do for a career? Buying a house, doing this, doing that. If I don't get her buy-in, like where she feels comfortable and confident, if she's like, then I don't want to move forward. But if she's comfortable and confident, she feels like it's right, and she gives me a go ahead, then almost pretty much, I mean, not almost, I think every situation in our marriage has worked out better because of that.
mm. Now, you shared that going into the military, there was more of a counseling compared, like you guys counseling together, you and your wife. And I think you and I could probably fill a podcast of just how amazing your wife is. We could just fill that
Right.
whole episode with just that. That's how much I respect your wife. And at the same token, tell me a little about what was the difference then, if that you've had some of those go make the decision, and now it's more of a counsel together and make a decision. How did she feel about you joining the military, and how did that work out differently? I mean, obviously you're in the military, so it sounds like there's a resolution there, but I'm interested to know.
Yeah, I remember the first time I approached her, but it was actually back in 2010 when I was at University of Phoenix, and I started looking at the process. I had to speak with a chaplain wife to kind of get a perspective. She did not want me to go in the Army. I'd always felt interested to join the military. I actually looked in the Air Force before going to University of Phoenix, and that didn't pan out. But so I talked to her about it, and then I just encouraged her to like to pray on it, to get a witness for herself, to feel like if she felt it was right. And it's funny because back in 2010 is when she prayed on it, and she felt like she was like emotional and just said, yeah, I feel like God wants me to trust this process.
Wow.
And then after she told me that, I was like, I think I'm gonna do counseling instead. We, so I went down the counseling path, and but she recognized in her own wisdom when I came back to her again in 2019 about becoming a chaplain again. She recognized that the time and season we were in 2010 probably wouldn't have been the best time for us to do that as a family. Probably weren't ready, things that we need to grow and develop in. And but now recognizing that we were ready. So when I asked her a second time about it, after I'd felt that when I felt that call to now move forward with it, she's really on board and said, I received my witness 10 years ago, so or almost 10 years ago. So if that's what the Lord wants to do, we'll do it. So
Well,
that's what we
I
did.
still remember going to dinner with you and your wife, and when you guys shared with us that news that you were in the program and you're going to go in to be a chaplain, and how emotional that was. And I have fond memories of you and your wife discussing that time.
Hmm.
So, James, we're here today, and we've had a great opportunity already here in your voice and in your path and in your story around intention. I'm interested to know, like, where in your life right now are you putting a lot of focus and intention? Where's something that we should dive into together here today? Have some fun. I love conversation with you.
Yeah.
Other people don't know this, but James is the guy that I go to when I want to have some deep discussion. And
There we
so
go.
I love those conversations we've had. I don't know how many hours I've spent on the phone with you discussing things that were possibly trivial, but I love and appreciate that about you. So I don't know, where are we spending our time today here, James?
Well, you did bring up the air assault school topic. I'll talk a little bit about that, and I can talk about some current things that I'm doing and some of the challenges that I'm facing and how I'm trying, like how I'm working towards being intentional with my time because my time is very, very constrained right now with the load that kind of is on my plate.
Hmm.
But I made a decision, or one of my interests was in Army as a chaplain, we're non-combative, so we don't carry weapons. If an enemy force captures us, according to the Geneva Convention, they're supposed to release us as a non-combatant, in theory. But we go where the soldiers go. So if I'm with the infantry battalion and we're out in the battlefield, you probably see these in movies like Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers or something like that, where the chaplains are out there when the bullets are firing and they're giving last rites, those kind of things. So chaplains are where the soldiers are. So they place themselves in danger. And so one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to, not having been prior experience and not having that basic training kind of experience, I did want to put myself through some tough and challenging schools with the Army to kind of enhance my experience with the Army and also to challenge myself. The Army provides a lot of opportunities for schools and progression. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to being in the military. And a couple of schools, you got airborne school, you got air assault. A big one is like ranger school, and a lot of great outstanding schools that the military provides for their soldiers. But airborne is one where you're jumping out of planes and you're landing. And I've heard a lot of stories of people getting injuries. And I don't mind jumping out of a plane. It's the landing part that always worries me. And air assault school is considered, they call it the Army's 10 toughest days, which I've spoken to soldiers that if they've done ranger school, they're like, ranger school is by far the hardest. Like, there's nothing that compares.
Okay.
Like, in regards to airborne air assault, but it is tough. It's like technically 11 days. Day zero, you're doing obstacle courses and a run, and so you're doing a lot of physical tests. You're doing mental tests. You get trained real quick, and then you have to perform the function,
Hmm.
and you're constantly tested. And it's a big thing they talk about is attention to detail in the school. You have a
Okay.
packing list. It's a big packing list. And if you're forgetting one item, you're forgetting a pen, if you're forgetting your ID tags or a notepad, because they'll check on certain days. You have to do a ruck. We have to do 2 mile run, 4 mile run, 6 mile ruck, 12 mile ruck under a certain time frame. And so you're doing all these physical challenges, but the mental stress is what I was not probably prepared for. Physically, I had been trained up for the obstacle courses, first time go on that stuff, the rucks, the runs. They were hard. Don't get me wrong. The 12 mile ruck with 35 pounds, probably more like 40,
Mm-hmm.
is brutal. But the mental stress of making sure you got everything, because literally, if they do the thing, and you got this big formation. We started with 300, I think 310 soldiers, and
Yeah.
we graduated 150, so it was about 50%
Yeah.
failure rate, and that's about typical. And if you're forgetting something, you go to the front, and people were dropping or disappearing like every day, all the time for showing up late, this or that, not passing a
Yeah.
test. And you get probably day two, day three, and physically you're exhausted, you're mentally exhausted, and then you start questioning,
Hmm.
do I really want to do this? Like, and then you get through some hard points, you get to day 7, day 8, and you can start to feel good about yourself that, hey, I made it day 7, day 8. If I got dropped after day 8 because I didn't pass the sling loads or I didn't pass the Swiss seat, or I mean, we get to rappel out of a Black Hawk, which is cool.
Oh, that's
But you start to think, oh, maybe if I don't make it, I can go back and say, well, I made it to day 8. But so by completing the air assault school and being one of those soldiers that remained, because there's some that have been there, they're on their fourth try of air assault school. And to be a chaplain, I was the only chaplain in a group of 300 soldiers.
yeah.
So I felt extra pressure because I was a captain, I was an officer, I was a chaplain. Like, I wanted to perform well, and I didn't want to disappoint. To be at the end, it made me realize the importance of not just showing up, but also succeeding, like accomplishing, finishing the mission. That's where the true joy came from for me, was like, I did it. Like, I'm done, right? Like,
Hmm.
I accomplished this. And my leadership team back here was so supportive of it, and they were so pumped up for me to do that. And see a chaplain do that is not something that happens very often.
Because it's not
You
required.
know,
None of these schools is required of a chaplain. You don't have to
right.
participate in order to be a chaplain, right?
Correct. Yeah, you don't. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't. Not at all. So if you want to be in certain units, like a ranger regiment or
Okay.
an airborne, you would need to go to definitely airborne school, and then
Okay.
ranger school. But yeah, so some things like that are, but to be a chaplain, no, you don't have to. They can't make you go to those
So
locations.
there's the physical side that you've talked about. I want to really quickly mention rucking. That's where you have a weighted pack on, vest,
Hmm.
backpack kind of scenario, and you're carrying extra weight and you have to go the distance. Some people don't recognize what rucking is. I think rucking is
Yeah, yeah.
incredible, such a smart thing to do. Anyways, so there's the physical side that you have to go through, but then you said, then there's the mental side. You did mention, then there's the doubt. There was like, tell me more about those experiences, because for it to be a 50% graduation ratio, I think I would imagine that everybody's going to have to get to that point mentally where it's, I'm here because I want to be, as opposed to this was a fun idea. Now I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
what's that about?
Yeah, yeah, no, you're like I definitely was at the point where, man, if I fail, if I forget something, or if I fail a test, like I ain't coming back. This is hard. This is hard. It's
Mm.
stressful. It's not. They don't make it enjoyable, right? It's not like building camaraderie and esprit de corps kind of stuff. It's just a grind, and they call it the mock up. They run you through the mock up all the time, and you have to do five and dimes, which every day you come in, you have to do 10 push-ups with your rucksack on, which is 30 doing 10 push-ups on an inverted off a post, and then you
Mm.
take off your ruck and you have to do five pull-ups, and then when you leave you have to do that, and then they run you, and so yeah, you get to a point where it's like, oh, what was I thinking, like
Mm.
why did I volunteer to come to this? And so there comes a moment where you just have to like, you just got to keep moving forward, right? You just got to take that step. And another important part too is I had accountability, right? We talk about battle buddies a lot in the Army. You look to your right, your left, and we have battle buddies, and I had a battle buddy there, and there was a sergeant, and he looked after me, I looked after him, we checked each other's bags, we made sure we had all of our gear for the next morning formation so we didn't get dropped. We were with each other for the whole ruck, encouraging each other. He was a much better rucker than I was. He's done much longer rucks and was
Mm.
in great shape, but that's important to have, right? You got to have a support person in that journey, because if not, you get in your own head and the negativity starts coming, because we both had our moments where we just day three, day four, we're just like down, like it was rough,
Mm.
and
Mm.
we talked about it, encouraged each other, we prayed together. He's a Christian himself. We helped encourage each other. And we had another soldier join our group that we supported one another, and then we'd go out to get lunch when we had time, and build that camaraderie. But that's an important piece, I think, of getting through hard times, is having support. I think too many, especially in counseling world, like too many people, I tell them you'll fail if you try to overcome this addiction or this cycle on your own.
Huh.
It's undefeated. So you have to have a support system to accomplish. It's good to have a support system to accomplish hard things, be a team player, a good teammate.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe, follow, and download our episode. Your support allows us to bring more intentional guests just like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's get back to the episode. Man, what great message it is to look at the mental side of that challenge you went through. Like, it was a period of time. And I remember I called you in the middle of that. I think you were on day 7 or 8 when we chatted briefly. Maybe in an evening you were in the middle of that. And man, that was so cool to hear that you had come on the tail end of that. You hadn't completed it. Maybe it was day 8 or 9 or something like that we talked. But when you've got support, you're able to get through the doubt, the mental side of the things. And you, like you said, you learn that in counseling too. What a immensely cool thing to do because of what it represented. Tell me, you said that your team was all excited about it and you're the only chaplain out of 300. Like, that's got to be something to say, man. Like, that's intention right there, to go do this when you don't necessarily have to. I recognize if you want to be on a certain team, that would make sense. But with the unit you're already assigned to, you don't have to do this school. And what was the reaction of not just your team, but in general? Do you feel like it's changed kind of we got the awesome chaplain, we got the hardcore chaplain, we don't got the wimp? And I'm sure no chaplain is a wimp, but I'm just saying, like, you went above and beyond.
Yeah, when you have soldiers that go to those kind of schools and they come back successfully, and again, I think the key word is you got to succeed. You got to have a mentality that you want to succeed. Now, if you don't, like, and that happens, right? And I could have dropped out or failed, and I came close a couple times, and grateful that I didn't. However, that's a mentality I think you got to have. So when you come back, it's a success that breeds success amongst other people, or inspires people that they see, oh, I'm 40 years old, right? And I'm out there with cadets that are in ROTC programs in their 20s, really sharp young generation we have coming up in the Army. And then other soldiers are enlisted that are well experienced and going and competing and striving for success with them. And you come back to your unit. When I got recognized for it by one of our sergeant majors, and I know he was proud. He'd done air assault. He'd gone to it's in Fort Campbell. There's multiple locations, but the one of the big primary ones is Fort Campbell, Sobolowski Air Assault School, and he did it there. So he was really pumped up on, hey, you guys want to go? We'll get you out there. Chaplain did it. You guys. And I had a lot of soldiers come and asking me like, yeah, I want to do air assault and I want to do airborne. And I'm like, great. Like, what's keeping you from doing it? Like, they're encouraging you, and they're like, oh, this and that. And I'm like, all right. So you're giving me. So then I went and now we set up me and my religious affairs specialist, so as a chaplain, you always have easier term is chaplain assistant. That's the old school term. It's religious
Okay.
affairs specialist now, but they provide security. So when we go out in the battlefield, or they carry the weapon, they ensure chaplain safety and support and work side by side with me. So me and Sergeant Cromartie, we went and we got it organized to do an air assault obstacle course here on post. There's a couple qualifications. You got to do the obstacle course, at least here, and then you got to do show that you can do 12-mile ruck in under 3 hours. And so we got all that stuff set up for these soldiers. And so now we're able to get 6 more that are getting ready to go for themselves to the school. And when you start getting people that are going to schools, I know what it did for me. It was just a weird feeling, but it was like, I just felt more confident. Like before, because I was like, oh, I'm not enlisted and I don't know much and da da da. But then you achieve something like that, and there's just like a sense of confidence that is not like a pride sense, but just, oh, I can do hard things. And then the life around you slows down in that moment. And when I came back, I just felt like what I did in my job and what I did for myself, I just felt like there's more confidence and things were slowing down for me. And so that was a cool personal experience, but also the effect it has in a team when others are improving themselves, they're doing hard things and succeeding at it, can multiply too in a
Yeah.
group or battalion.
Well, congratulations. From a civilian perspective that has very limited perspective on this, like you guys do inside. Dude, I'm proud and excited for you that you accomplished that in addition to just being there anyways. Earlier, you had mentioned that there was a lot of time constraints, like your life is you've got a lot on your plate. What else could we speak of that would be worthwhile here in this message of accomplishing, hitting your visions, accomplishing something amazing, working together with other people? You've mentioned on so many great topics already.
Yeah, so you did ask me like some things that I'm working on. Like I have a whiteboard in my room. Tried to do this last few years, just writing down my goals, put a date on it. Right. One of my mentors in my life said, write it down, put a date on it. You're 80% of the way there. And so I have whiteboard, and some of these goals aren't like, I know we try to do yearly goals, but I have like goals that are 3 years out, 5 years out. I have dates on them. I have goals that are right, the standard financial, relationship, physical kind of stuff. And then fun stuff. Like I put one goal to get my boat license because I'm in Louisiana and they got a lot of lakes around here. Unfortunately, I have alligators. And the crazy thing, Brian, like come from the West Coast, like
Yeah.
they literally swim. People swim out here and they're like, oh, it's fine. I don't even know anyone that's been attacked by an alligator. You leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. I'm just like, this is crazy to me. But so I was like, okay, well, I got to kind of get out in this experience. So I went and got my boat. Like I did. So I put a goal, get my boat license, and I got my boat license, and I haven't gone out since. But that was back in
Yeah,
April.
well, you did it. Yeah.
But I did it, and I have it. So when I do put it on my schedule to go do something, I can take my wife and kids and go put around on the lake out here. But so yeah, I'm trying to be intentional. I'm training up right now for half marathon. I've never done a half marathon. I want to do half marathon. Now a 12-mile ruck is in under 3 hours, probably like definitely harder. It's going to be harder than I think than 13 miles. So I've been run training now and getting that up. I want to do a half marathon and just not to do it for a certain time, just to complete it. That's kind of that next goal I've been working on. So I should have it done in a couple weeks. I'm going to do a race in a couple weeks, January 6th for it. So there's those things, like personal things I want to do.
Well, let me jump in here real quick,
Yeah.
James. On those, a quote it's James Clear's quote: "Winners and losers have the same goal."
Mm-hmm.
So literally, if it's two teams competing for a championship, they both have the goal to win, right? To do the thing. What has setting the goals? You have a board in your room that you update regularly. That you're setting these goals that are here and now, and then in the future. how has that helped you? You said it's 80% of the way there. I might argue a little bit on that, but it doesn't really matter. What has setting goals done for you personally?
Well, it gives direction to what am I working on. I mean, you're talking about the intentional way to be more intentional with what I'm doing with my life. Dave Ramsey always says, if you don't tell your money where to go, you'll wonder where it went. I'll tell the soldiers,
Mm,
if you don't tell your life where to go, you'll wonder where it went. So many of them get
mm,
stuck on video games and on their phones and YouTube. And I was like, hey, what are you telling your life to do? And I realized, like, when I hit 40, I was like, man, I've experienced a lot in life by 40, a couple master's degrees. I'm like, that's cool. I got to be a counselor, and I'm a chaplain and doing all these things by 40. And I'm like, I could set aside a year just focusing on one thing. Like, what if I did boxing for 1 year and I just trained
mm.
for boxing every week for 1 year? And then I learn a skill set, right? And it becomes part of my repertoire in life. Or what if I spend 2 years just focus on studying a language, Rosetta Stone, whatever? Like, I can do 2 year increments of something for every 2 year period, just focusing on one thing. And then in 10 years, I'll be 50, and then I might have 5 new skill sets that
Mm.
I could retain and maybe even tap into at certain points when I really need to. So I just started thinking more towards time frames and just trying to master or get really good at something to be a little more intentional with my time. And I think the other factor too is for success, and that is Tony Robbins talks about this, taking massive action towards your goal and what you want to accomplish. And so writing down, put a date on it just makes me like, it's a weird thing, to be honest. Like, sometimes just writing it down and put a date on it, like sometimes I don't even really put that much effort into it. It just happens. Oh, look,
Mm.
I hit that one, and maybe it's too easy of a goal. It's just weird that law of attraction, or whatever you want to call it, just pulls it into existence. But the ones that are really hard, then it's about taking massive action or taking action towards it to achieve those goals. But I have to be intentional with my time right now. Like, just the amount of stuff I have on my plate is immense, is immense. Probably the
Tell
hardest.
us what else is on your plate, James.
Yeah, so in October 8th, actually, I was called in my church to serve as a bishop on
Mm.
top of being a chaplain. So I have 500 soldiers and their families in the battalion that I serve. And then so I work with them, and then I have 350 members of my congregation, about 100 to 110 come in pretty regularly. And so there's a lot of needs, and on top of that I have 6 kids, right? Just having 6 kids
Yeah,
alone
yeah.
would be hard from 16, right? Teenagers, I mean, they're expensive, and um, I try to build relationships with them, but it costs a lot more money than it does sitting on the ground and playing blocks with my 1 year old. Requires a lot more at times, but and it's a
So
time frame. Like,
let me hop in here real quick for some of those
yeah,
listeners that being with 500, you said 505, 550 soldiers.
about 500. Yeah, it fluctuates,
Yeah,
but
about so
on average.
500 soldiers that you're serving in your responsibility and duty as a chaplain captain. And then when you get called as a bishop to lead a congregation, you're in a religion where it's not paid ministry. This isn't, hey, we're going to make it worth your while to be leading and helping and teaching and training and all that kind of stuff. So that demands an amount of time on your efforts at minimum on your Sundays. And there are weekly responsibilities with youth that are from 11-year-old to 18 years old that you're there consistently. So that's a one night a week. And then if you have any other meetings on top of that, and then events and special organized meetings that happen, you're a part of it. So I'm just saying that for the benefit of those that are hearing that what he just got called to, what James just got called to in his religion, in addition, is a significant amount of time. So I don't want to belabor the point, but that's in addition to what you're already doing, and having 6 kids. I don't know. I think people would call you crazy. People would just
Yeah,
say, "You're crazy. How are you doing it? How are you getting this all done?"
yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I would definitely have to give glory to God for just helping me get through it on a day-to-day basis. I've definitely been supported to that process. But again, really the intention, when you talk about the intentional way, I have to be intentional with my time, because I've always been told by leaders, right, your family is still the priority, right? No success in the church can compensate for the failure in your home. and or in anything, church or work, whatever, it doesn't matter. And so that's a hard task. At the same time, there's such a demand for the responsibility of the bishop. And so, a great principle I learned when I was at our chaplain basic officer leadership course, that 3 months I was gone. One of my buddies that I met, he was our platoon leader, and you play these roles of like leadership. You get experience what it's like for the Army. We'll never be a platoon leader or those kind of roles, but you get the feel for it, so you understand what soldiers are going through. And I was a squad leader, and he'd always have a morning meeting with us and then an end of day meeting with us. And I talked to him about that principle. He was a West Point graduate, a prior infantry officer, decided to become a Catholic priest, which is a huge commitment in itself. 10 years of
Wow.
studies and schooling to become a priest. A great person. And his name is Bill. And so Bill, we were talking about this, and he said, yeah, I talked to him about this piece where he just does such a good job of organizing us as his squad leaders and giving us the information, and he has us go disseminate information and bring it back to him. And he's like, yeah, your point of influence is maybe 3 to 5 people. He said, I'm the platoon leader, but I can't be the platoon leader for everybody. I need you, the squad leaders, to help organize that. And so I really try to take that principle in this calling as well. I can't be there for every member in our congregation. And there's needs. There's financial needs, there's spiritual needs, there's counseling needs, there's events. And a lot of times I'll look to the bishop to make the final decision and those kind of things. And so I've really been intentional about delegating, organizing, right? And there's a big push. At the end of the year, we have our tithing declarations too. So I get called in October and it's boom.
Oh
So I'm trying
man.
to get in
Yeah.
with all these members and get to know them. I'm an outsider, so to say. We're mixed military plus those that live locally. So in some ways, I'm kind of an outsider. I don't know everyone's backstories and the families that have lived here for 20, 30, 40 years. And so I'm trying to do those meetings and schedule those things. And I have to have Wednesdays are a focus for youth programs. So my Wednesday nights are busy. I set aside 6 to 8 on Thursdays to do tithing decorations. Then Sundays, I'm there from 7:30 in the morning till 3-ish, depending on appointments and so forth. And sometimes I can barely get down from the hall to the bathroom. Like I get out of a meeting, I'm trying, like, I go to the bathroom, and I'm getting stopped by like 3 different people. They wouldn't stop me before. They have questions or need to talk to me about something.
Mhm.
And so I've really pushed it. Who are my 3 to 5 people, or who are my 4 to 6? That those are the people I communicate with, and they go and communicate with others. And if they need to come back, they come through that channel, and then it comes to me. So I got my counselors, I got my secretaries, and I got my Elders Quorum Relief Society president organizations. Those are, tend to be my primary. I have to work with young women. I work with the young women's as well, president, responsibility, and then young men's. And it's just, so I just have to keep it at that. Give my counselors responsibilities to help run the other organizations. And I give my presidents, I say, what counselors do you want? You pick the best, we'll give you the best, you take them. Because we're gonna put a lot on you. I cannot do all of this stuff and survive. Like get to those
Yeah.
breaking points, right? I think it's important in an organization or even a family structure to be intentional with what you can control, like who you can influence. This is what Bill talked about. You can only influence 3 to 5. So be really good at influencing those, and then they go and influence others. And not try to be a leader where you lead for everybody and you're that type of leader, because I will get burnt out, and most people do. And it's not sustainable for the organization, because when that leader leaves, then everything else kind of falls apart because everyone else is underutilized in those situations. So
So
I try to manage that. I try to manage that with working well with people as best as I can.
yeah, the thought came to my mind is with you having a focus on delegating and allowing other people to do their work in the same organization, right? How does your family experience that delegation? Meaning, how do they experience you because of that delegation?
Like in our own home. Yeah, so I think a big part of it is my wife and we communicate constantly, like all the time. My daughter, my oldest, like, why are you guys always calling each other? I'll be like on the phone with my wife and hang up, and like 5 minutes later I'm calling her again, or she's calling me. She's like, you guys just talked to each other like 5 minutes ago, And so we have to communicate, and we have calendars, and we've spent time reviewing those calendars as a family. We have responsibilities for chores that are rotating, have been pretty consistent for the last couple of years. And as the other girls get older, we try to incorporate them in chores around the house to help out mom. And we also try to make sure they're rewarded, just take good care of them for helping us out in the hard lifting, heavy lifting that we have to do as parents. My wife's very active as a chaplain spouse. It's a pastor and pastor's wife. The pastor's wife is going to play a big role in the congregation, and she plays an active role in the soldiers and the soldier spouses, and they do what they call coffees, where they get together with spouses and do activities and do fundraisers and put on Christmas parties. And so she's very active in that. For our battalion, there's also a UMT or chaplain spouses group, and she tries to be supportive of those things as long as serving in our church. And so, yeah, we have assignments, so to say. We try to coordinate and accommodate and be flexible. I have kids. One's in dance. I got one of my daughters. She's a freshman. She's in softball. She's in the JRTC, the Raiders program for the high school, and she also wants to do cross country or track and field. And another one that's in dance, and another one's in soccer. So sometimes we have competing like practice schedules, and we're just trying to who's going to drop off who and where. The challenge too is I go for school or I get deployed, and then it gets really difficult, and that's where you really the grind really starts to happen. We need battle buddies, people to help us out in that process, because no one could really do that alone.
Yeah, battle buddies.
I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, absolutely. I remember, well, I've done this a few times in my life where I've kept track of every minute of my week, month, every minute, and allocated that I put it into 12 different categories. And I was surprised at the first week that I did this, what amount of time I spent with certain things that on my list would be top priority. Mm-hmm. And then coming to the end of that week and looking at how much time did I spend with that individual child. Mm-hmm. And it was embarrassing in some cases. So as your time is constrained in such a way, obviously delegation and managing, something I've seen consistent with other people, like you just said, is calendaring, communication with your wife, like communicating with the person that's helping lead this thing out, whether it be in the chaplain arena with your assistant, with your wife that's doing other things within the chaplain community, the military, and in your faith community as well. Those things matter a great deal. And what time is left, right? What time is left for those things that you would say, and all those things matter. All the things that you've brought up today in our conversation matter. They're important. And what matters most? You said it was family. You said that is no success outside of the home can compensate for failure inside. At least that's how you quoted somebody else. But if that's what you believe, that takes incredible effort in the position you're in, because you're not just twiddling your thumbs on a weekly basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and another good principle that I've learned as well, like through the Army learning, is one of our responsibilities as chaplains is we provide recommendations. We're considered special staff to battalion commander, who's in charge of all these soldiers. And the training and teaching the Army is like, you don't bring a problem to your commander without a solution. So if I'm out with the soldiers and I'm seeing like, hey, there's issues here, issues in morale, issues in conflict between leadership, or issues or concerns about families in the battalion, we call them COAs, course of action. Mentally, I'm always, when I go into these environments, because when you're in the middle, things are happening fast, everything's going, and it doesn't stop. It just doesn't. You'll keep going, and you're either in it or you're not, but it's going to keep moving. And so you have to be able to think about what the problem is and what are the course of actions, 1 and 2. You always have to have 2 course of actions to provide to the leadership or commander of what your recommendation is for the commander to make a decision based off that. Because the commander can't always think about everyone's problems and all the possible solutions for it. You got to be the expert, and I have to be the expert and present that to them. And so I think that can be true also in organizations, is sometimes you bring problems to people or the leadership, but I have probably more leadership influence as a bishop. When I get organizational leaders coming to me with problems, I'll say, okay, I understand your problem, but I need you to present me with a solution. And until you have a solution, there's no solution, then the problem will remain until we have solutions. And I give that back ownership, or I give ownership back to that individual to take that on. And I think leaders have to be intentional with that, or family. Like my kids, I'll do this with my kids. We'll Well, that's not fair. Okay, you're saying it's a problem, but what's your solution? Oh, well, I don't know. I'll say, okay, well, when you do know, let me know and present it to me and we'll see if it works. But I'm not going to, I don't have the
Mm,
mental energy and the time to think through all your problems that are going on all the time, or everyone's problems going on all the time. So when you come to me, I need you to think that through and present what you think that course of action should be. And I think it's good for children to develop that skill set too of what's the problem, what's my course of action, and how can we solve that? I might need mom or dad's help to do that because I can't drive yet, but it helps them see too, like our perspective of what we're trying to manage and all this. So that's just another principle I think that's been very helpful that I've applied.
yeah. Yeah, I love it. I love it because in any situation, when two people are talking, there's always the other side. There's always the other person that brings that, right? If someone comes to tell you their problem, they're a part of it. Not that they have to be the maker of the problem, but they're part of what is happening and how it can be resolved. Powerful words. Golly. I think that for you to have done what you've done to this point in your life, is it funny to say middle aged? You're middle aged ish in that area. You've been through things and you've taken some big leaps, big transitions in your life. I think it's served us to hear about how you think through things and how you set your goals and how you push through and accomplish things and how that changes you. Like you said, one of the things I really love that you said is that when you accomplished the air assault school, when you did that, it gave you more confidence to, at minimum, say, I can do really challenging things. At minimum, I'm sure there's a lot more to it, but like at minimum. And so sometimes when we don't go after something, even if we fail, it's okay to push through. But when we succeed, it gives us experience that we can go do cool things. So, James, what other words of wisdom would you share as we close our conversation here today? What else needs to be said on this topic that we've gone through a lot of fun things today.
Yeah, I think probably one of the things I was thinking about with the air assault school I was going to bring up that I didn't earlier is that 12-mile ruck under 3 hours, carrying the weight you're carrying. And at about mile nine, 9.5, I think there's a part on it where you're coming downhill and then you got to hit back uphill. And I remember taking a step going back uphill, my whole left leg just locked up. And I knew people drop out from that because of cramping. But for me, I started panicking a little bit, like, oh crap, like I've never felt my whole leg lock up like that. And I didn't know what to do. And I started to try to slow down my pace, catch my breath, allow my body to re-energize, so to say. But the other factor too, and I've told this to like the soldiers here that are going to air assault school and they've asked for my feedback, especially on the 12-mile ruck. Typically in the past, I would just show up for the event and just see if I can do it. I've been a lot more intentional when I'm coming into these events, doing research and so forth. So I studied it out and saw I went on YouTube and found those that are great at rucking and their tips. And so we have to have things to help support us to get through those moments. So I had what they call GU. It's just a little bit of electrolytes, a little bit of caffeine. And
Mm-hmm.
the strategy was take it every 3 miles, one every 3 miles, and have some chewy so you have some electrolytes. Because a ruck is tearing down your body. Like your body is just, whole body is being torn down because you're carrying all this weight. And it doesn't feel like a heavy lift, so say, but it is over a long period of time, especially for 3 hours. And so that's another thing. You have to prepare to succeed by planning to succeed. Some of these young soldiers, they just go up and show up for the 12-mile ruck thinking it's going to be that easy. It's like, no, you got to have a plan during your ruck. I had a strategy for my water intake. I had a strategy for my electrolytes. I had a strategy for my maybe a little bit of caffeine to keep me going. We had a strategy for the cadence. Like we're doing 30-60s or 61-20s where you're 60 seconds of jogging and then a minute or 2 minutes, 120 seconds of walking at a good pace. And then we'd have to scale back and then push up and scale back and push up. But you're in a cadence and you have a strategy to do that. And I think that's another thing that sometimes people don't create a cadence in their life. I talked to this about organizations and people in my organizations, like, what's your cadence? When are you meeting? Because if you're not meeting, you're not planning. If you're not planning, you're not executing. So you have to be consistent in your cadence, so you can actually achieve what you want. If you're not consistent in that cadence, then your chance for failure are gonna increase.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess that's the last thing I've learned and thought about
Man, I
too.
love that it's the specificity. It's having a strategy for each of these pieces. It's having an intention for each of these pieces, your water, your electrolytes, your like all the things you're going to counter. And not that you can know everything when you jump into something new, but do what you can to be prepared so when you jump in, like you have your legs are at least below you, like strong and can carry you through. Because a lot of people, that's where my opinion, James, is that showing up isn't 80%. Like like putting a goal out there isn't 80. That's my personal opinion. I'm not saying anybody's wrong for saying that, but showing up prepared can be the 80%. Showing up with intention, with this is how I'm going to operate inside of this thing, like you've done to prepare for the ruck, to prepare that you knew the hard spots and had some strategy to do it, even though maybe you didn't have the experience of going through it. You're like, okay, this is what I got to do, and this is how I'm going to have to interact with it and push through this point, as opposed to let it bury me. So, powerful words. I'm so grateful for your time and energy from all the things that are on your plate to dedicate this time with us to share your thoughts around how to be intentional and how that makes a difference in your life. Thank you so much for being here, James. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. And sorry if I talked too much. I wish I could have heard more from you on your thoughts. Some of the stuff,
No, dude,
but
we're here to learn from you. I'm
yeah,
I'm in every episode. They're going to hear from me. It's all right. All
yeah.
right. Thank
Well,
you so
thank you,
much.
Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on The Intentional Way. I'm Bryan Hatch, and it's been a true privilege to share this time with you. If today's episode has inspired you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe, follow, and download our episodes. Your support not only helps us grow, it also enables us to bring more insightful conversations and exceptional guests right to you. Living intentionally begins with a single step, yours. So let's make the most of it. Until next time, seek intention by being completely present.